Did you know that most scientific literature is published in English? The answer can get a little bit complex, but it boils down to a couple of factors. Sure, English is the most spoken language in the world, but that only accounts for 13%. And the number of native English speakers is less than 5%. But it wasn't always the case that English was the most spoken language in science. Newton published in Latin, Einstein's papers were in German, and Marie Curie wrote hers in French. In fact, in the 15th to 17th century, scientists typically conducted their work in two languages: their native language, when discussing their ideas with peers, and in Latin, when communicating with scientists outside their home country. As the scientific revolution progressed through the 17th to 18th century, Latin began to fall out of fashion. For example, Galileo Galilei published in 1610 his discovery of the moons of Jupiter in Latin, but most of his later works were in Italian. He did this in order to connect more with the local audience for patronage and support. And this notion comes up later on as well. However, this shift made it more difficult for scientists to understand work done outside of their home countries. So the scientific community decided to come together and slowly begin to consolidate. By the early 19th century, the bulk of scientists' communication and published research was published in three languages: French, English, and German. But then there was only one. By the late 20th century, English remained as the dominant language as the US strengthened its place in the world. Its influence on the global scientific community has continued to increase ever since. Another underlying driver is money. A lot of research funding comes from the US, and many international scientists come to the US to conduct research. In 2019, immigrants made up almost 1/4 of all STEM workers in the United States. Today, by publishing your work in English, you have more of a chance of people reading your work and a better chance of getting recognition. So more and more opt to publish their research in English. It's self-perpetuating. Furthermore, as a consequence, new discoveries mean scientific languages like quark or chromosome become coined in English. In many countries, college-level science education is now conducted in English, partially because studying science in English is a good preparation for future scientific career, and partially because the necessary words don't exist in any other language. But even with English language science education around the world, non-native speakers are still often at a disadvantage in terms of energy and time. If you've ever tried to learn another language, you know how hard and how long it takes. And if you're publishing, it can be pricey to get your work translated and edited based on this graph. And sometimes it's hard to express nuance, and subtle things are lost in the process. If you know English slang, you may find this acronym to describe copper nanotubes to be amusing. But if you're a scientist wishing to be taken seriously, it's hardly helpful. Ironically, though, the acronym stuck. Finally, knowledge that isn't produced by traditional research methods still have scientific value. And how much knowledge is not being read or spread because it's not in English? Indigenous tribes in Indonesia pass down oral histories on how to recognize signs of an impending earthquake and safely escape to higher ground. And this is what happened in the 2004 tsunami. Similarly, the literature of Australia passed down an ancient legend of a deadly fire devil that crashed into the earth, which geologists believe to be a meteorite that landed 4,700 years ago. Science's language bias preferences a certain way to look at the world, one that may gatekeep scientific discourse. For me personally, I have so much respect for people who conduct science in multiple languages. And part of the process in science is striving to understand one another and one another's way of thinking. And it's already hard enough to describe science in everyday words. Imagine trying to explain science in another language that is not your native language. A lot to think about. Do you think science should just be conducted in one language? In recent years, China has overtaken the US in terms of the amount of published science, as well as the most cited works. Do you think this will change things? Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this kind of content. I'm excited to do more videos like this in the future.